There's a vast difference between states and the immortal you. The immortal man is God. Man is all imagination, and God is man, and exists in us, and we in him. The eternal body of man is the imagination, and that is God himself. God is playing all the parts. There's only one actor in the world. There's only one author, and that is God. And that God of whom I speak is your own wonderful human imagination. That is the operant power in the world. If I speak of your God, the chances are you will think of an existent someone outside of yourself. But if I speak of your imagination, I am certain you will think only of yourself. Well, that is the God of whom I speak, playing all the parts. The spiritual states of the soul are eternal. You do not change them. You pass through them like a traveler. These eternal states are all within the human imagination. They culminate in redemption, and redemption is preceded by apostleship. That's when you are called. So I am finding myself in a state where I'm called. The night I was called back in 1929, I had no idea I had arrived at that state. But here I'm called into the presence of infinite love, and it's man. Having answered his question correctly, that love was the greatest thing in the world, he embraced me and we fused and became one body, one spirit. For he who is united to the Lord becomes one spirit with the Lord. At that moment it was not enough to be called and to be incorporated into the body of God, but to be sent on a mission. And I did not know that mission until it unfolded itself within me. And it took 30 years. 30 years later, suddenly it erupted within me, and the entire story of Jesus unfolded itself within me, casting me in the central role of the story. Then I knew who the one called Jesus of the story really is. He is the culminating point of God in man. So when man actually completes the journey and comes to the fullness of it all, he discovers he is the one he's been seeking all through his journey. But he comes to that at the very end. He is infinitely greater than all the states. He created these, and they are permanent within man, within the human imagination. But when he arrives at that state, it's the last of the journey. And then he awakens and he knows who he is. And these experiences gives him the certainty that he is God. He knows the book is all about himself. It's not about any being but God. And he's found God within himself, and he is God. But that God of whom I speak is your own wonderful human imagination. It's based purely upon motion, the first creative act in Scripture that is recorded, and the Spirit of the Lord moved. He moved. Well, the Spirit of the Lord is in man. Do you not realize that ye are the temple of the living God, and the Spirit of God dwells in you? He dwells in me, where? As my own wonderful human imagination. Now I go back to see how he first created. He created by emotion. I move from one state into another state. If it is the state desired, then I have a sense of relief when I get into the state desired. If tonight I was up against it financially, and then suddenly I came into a fortune, what would be the outstanding feeling that I would have? Of all the pleasures that man could ever experience in this world, relief is the most keenly felt. It comes in the creative act. Relief, call it by another name if you will, but it is relief at that moment of explosion. But the same thing is true when I move into a state. What would the feeling be like if it were true? And I work myself into that state as though it is true. If I am in that state, I can't suppress the sense of relief. And so I have the sense of relief because I've done it. Now what do I do after that? Nothing. Remain in the state. It has its own appointed hour, and it ripens, and it's going to flower. Don't be concerned, you're in the state. Now let it unfold itself in its own wonderful natural way. It has ways and means that no one knows. Its ways are past finding out. So I move myself into a state. I don't remain in the state that I want to leave behind me and push a button and think something is going to happen. I move. I move from one state into another state. But these states I am creating. I was called and incorporated into the body of the living God. He is a living God. He's not the God of the dead. Nothing dies in God. But nothing. Everything is alive. And the unfinished work, you're going to finish it. No one is going to fail because God is the operant power and God is that individual's human imagination. And he's moving towards self-redemption. And he goes through these states. Infinite states. Prayer is giving thanks. You don't get on your knees and petition any being outside of yourself. There is no intermediary between yourself and self. You need nothing on the outside. It's all within self. What would the feeling be like if it were true? With that, I catch that feeling, and then I work myself into that state. What would it be like? All right, I know what it would be like. Well, feel it. And keep on feeling it and keep on feeling it until all of a sudden you're relieved. There's a release within you. And then it's done. You can't do it a second time. It's done. So I say, I'm looking at the world from a spot. At every moment in time, I'm always viewing the world from a place. That place could be from a financial position in my world. It could be from a physical position in my world. It could be, you name it. I'm looking from a certain state. If I desire a change, I simply assume that I have changed. In my mind's eye, I saw a change. The whole thing is based upon motion. It's a psychological motion. We're living in a world of imagination. And this whole vast outpictured world was first imagined. There is the thing you see here that wasn't first imagined. And yet, close as he is, you still can't find him. Why? Why can't I find him as something objective? Because he is the reality I call imagination. I see the fruits of my imaginal acts, but I do not see the actor as I see the outpouring of his activity. For he is the reality I call imagination. So here, the God in you is your own wonderful human imagination. That is God. That's the one, when you completely awaken, you're going to know. That's what man basically is hungering for, the awakening of imagination, which is the awakening of God within it. That is the only God of which the Bible speaks. There is no other God. He arises in you as you. So, because he is you, there's no one else to awaken but God, and God is your own wonderful human imagination. But no limit upon the power of belief. Can you believe? All prayers are answered if you know how to pray. And pray is not begging. You don't petition. You give thanks. Well, you aren't going to give thanks to something that isn't. But you must actually believe in God. As you're told, he who comes to God must first believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. But you must first believe that he exists. Well, I know he exists. I hope that everyone here knows he does exist. But as Blake said, why stand we here trembling around, calling on God for help, and not ourselves, in whom God dwells? So why turn on the outside to call upon a God when he dwells in me? Well, he dwells in me as my imagination. So I will commune with my own imagination until I am satisfied that it is done. And you get into the habit of feeling that it's done. The feeling of relief. And then you go about your business. And let it take its own course. It will take its course and it will come out perfectly. So you don't beg anyone. You don't petition anyone. And it has nothing to do with so-called holiness. That is such an abused word. You have everything that it takes to be the man, to be the woman that you want to be. Know what you want to be. Be definite. When you know exactly what you want to be, don't ask anyone if it's possible. You simply feel that you are it. What would the feeling be like if it were true? For I know from my own experience that an assumption, though denied by my senses and therefore called by the world false, if persisted in, will harden into facts. That I do know. If you will persist in it, it will harden into facts. That is a law. How else would you interpret this statement from the 11th chapter of the book of Mark? Whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and you will. How are you going to interpret that? Whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and you will. No limit is placed upon the power of belief. It doesn't even say it has to be good for you. It leaves you entirely free to make your choice and take the risk. Because when you reap that state, you're also going to reap the consequences of that state. So, take your choice, but also be willing to take the consequences of the state. And you could go through life just simply knowing there are only states. You see a person in the gutter today, he need not be in the gutter forever. Take him out of the gutter in your mind's eye. So I say to anyone, you can try it. Don't pass the buck and help everyone in this world. You create states to deliver individuals evermore. But God is above all states, and you are God. Listen to these words. In the King James Version and Moffat's Version and others that I have at home, it's correctly translated. The Revised Standard Version, the New English Version, have added a word that confuses the entire thing. This is now the 8th chapter, the 11th verse of Romans. If the Spirit of Him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in us, He will also raise Christ. Two entirely different ones. But if you say also raise Jesus Christ, you're going to confuse the entire thing. So the King James Version leaves off the word Jesus when it comes to the second raising, which is Christ. And it happens just like that. Jesus comes first. It's the I am of man. That's the Father. He is awakened first. Now when you read the Bible in the future, and I hope you all will, always bear in mind the characters mentioned there and depicted there are not individuals as you and I are. They are states of consciousness. From Adam to the very end. These are all states of consciousness. So the names signify the state, if you know the meaning of the name. But when you meet these states of consciousness in vision, they are personified. And you see a man, but it is not man as you are man. All these are contained within the human imagination. You are above all states. You are God. Every being in this world is God, and God is one. Only one God. And that God is named forever and forever is I am. That's the being. There's no one present, just yourself. And you come out without the help of anyone. Everything unfolds within the imagination of man, and that is God. You have the power and the right to become the man, to become the woman that you want to be. The Lord sees not what man sees. Man sees the outward appearance, but the Lord sees the heart.